Anything.
All right, we're here.
No sponsors. We have no commercials.
We don't have any sponsors. We don't have any commercials, but technically the show is sponsored by all of you.
Subscribe, the gel that will make your hair grow faster. Subscribe gel.
That's right. And I really have to thank everyone. We have seen a noticeable uptick in subscriptions.
Oh, come on.
Over the past few weeks. January's been a great month. People are really liking LBJ, Mark.
What? What about the ladies of LBJ? Because that is really...
I love the ladies.
Not only do the ladies like the ladies of LBJ, the ladies of LBJ is a really, really interesting episode.
And I think the public agrees with you because that episode, if you look at the statistics, is a pure hockey stick that goes, it's going right, growing over time, and then straight up. I mean,
why are they finding this now? Is there something in the news that says LBJ had sex with someone, or?
Well, continuously. No,
there's no recent scandal. Somebody.
I don't know what it is. I'm very happy that folks found it. There may be some of them here.
Isn't it amazing how nobody sues him for sexual harassment or anything, even though he's dead? I guess you could still sue the estate, if the president sexually harassed you, or maybe not. Maybe you can't sue.
Well, now that you mention it, technically he could have been seen as harassing women at the same time as Romeo and Juliet came out.
Right? Yeah.
And they're suing for $500 million.
Right. Can't you sue the LBJ Foundation saying, I know he's dead, but I have evidence that he sexually did things to me. Unless they might live in fear, like the Clinton people,
They might. Look. He'd been dead for almost 30 years, and they pulled the last episode of that history series.
Men Who Killed Kennedy, yeah.
So,
obviously his people, Valenti over at Warner Brothers and others are still in positions of power. Bill Moyers for many years at PBS.
Isn't Valenti watching his kid?
The kid is now the head of Warner Brothers. The daughter who... Oh, yes.
Okay. Well,
he succeeded very well. She's now still the head of Warner Brothers.
So I don't think you're going to be pitching your LBJ project to Warner Brothers?
In fact, when I did some work on LBJ, which was supposedly a miniseries for Oliver, he turned on me like a jackal. And I thought, of course, all of his movies are made at Warner Brothers. He probably freaked out because he got an email from Valenti or something from the daughter,
Oh, well, either way, if you guys want to know what the mystery is about and you haven't seen it yet, there are 3 LBJ episodes.
Oh, right.
Ladies is doing extremely well, and I'd recommend watching that one first. And then Did LBJ Kill JFK? Parts 1 and 2 are also doing very well. They've been found too, I think, through the first video.
Well, and don't forget, Viva was interviewing Roger Stone this weekend.
Yes.
And then Viva brought up the episode and the stuff that we did to Roger Stone, who wrote the book, Who Killed LBJ, or there's something to that. Who Killed JFK, or LBJ Killed JFK, whatever his book was. Little bits and pieces from the research community that was out there, Philip Nelson and others,
especially.
Noel Twinan and Dick Russell, a bunch of other people, including I want to say the DA Garrison out of New Orleans, who had that feeling.
Yep. Now, Barb, then here you go. Check it out tonight.
Yeah, Barb, strap yourself in. It's going to be a bumpy ride, honey. Strap yourself in, because that episode is apparently finding new viewers every day for reasons that Hunley and I can't understand, but are happy to bring you that news.
Absolutely. And I, again, wanted to thank everybody. And now, well, LBJ is probably maybe the most famous person involved in the case. We're going to be talking about maybe one of the most obscure people.
Well, I have other ones for later weeks, Eric. I mean, the Jim Braden episode and the Mac Wallace episodes are doing extremely well. People have found those two obscure guys. This guy today, another obscure player, but it just shows you the length, depth, and breadth of the people involved in the assassination on whatever level they're particularly involved in. This particular guy is not a conspirator. He is more of a whistleblower, which we'll get to in a little while. But yeah, we before we get to the end of the train, which hopefully the train, like I've discussed with Eric, may end November 22nd, 2023, with the 60th anniversary of the assassination of JFK, which is going to be a mega world media event, of which I think we might be the center of the storm at that point.
We're hoping.
Well, there are people going to be looking more closely, I think, at our work at that time. You know what I mean? Because of the holiday, or I don't know what's it called.
I say commemoration.
Commemoration is a better word than holiday. Although the Martin Luther King, is that his birthday or?
Yes. Wait.
Right.
Oh yeah. But they do it the same day of the year, so
right.
It's a day.
They released a statue this week to commemorate Martin Luther King, which did not go over well with the King family or the King aficionados. Let me just put it that way.
It was kind of weird.
Right. Well, this is, like I said to you, the reason I was able to predict the reaction was because there have been other King statues, Eric, that have received similar response from the MLK community. And as that woman, I posted that woman on Twitter to you, they do not want, and I don't know why they keep doing this, they do not want avant-garde or abstract art to represent their heroes. And yet they continue to create abstract and avant-garde art to represent Martin Luther King and others. It's not just MLK. So when this statue came out, which just to get to the Yiddish word of the day, maybe we can get out of the way. People described it, and I'll tell you what happened. The New York Post described it with quotation marks as looking like a penis in the New York Post. So all I did was tweet that from the Post. And I got a warning from Twitter, which I've now filed a grievance against, saying, are we still banning articles from the New York Post? I have never received a warning in my life from Twitter. They put out a warning. I contested it, saying that I retweeted an article from the New York Post. And they were saying this is sensitive and sexually suggestive. And I just figured I'm going to see where this goes.
Algorithm. It's a combination of there's a few things.
If that algorithm is still in effect to this day.
It's all in effect, dude. It's
never happened to me before, and I've posted far more provocative articles that has never occurred in my Twitter feed since 2008. So to all of a sudden get a warning for the first time in 2023, which is what I wrote in the letter to them, is a little disconcerting. Not that I care about them blocking that particular thing. It obviously was put up a million times after I did it. But what machinery, what ownership is allowing this to happen over there? And then I sent a tweet to Elon Musk about allowing me to take care of the Twitter files. as a veteran journalist who may have more journalistic bona fides than people like Michael Schellenberger with less CIA baggage, is what I wrote to Musk.
And your phone's been ringing today.
Nobody's called me yet, but there's others who are reaching out to him. So I said, I could come up to San Francisco, a city that I hate, but for this, it might be well worth it.
Find your way through everybody there.
People, dead bodies.
People don't realize all the internal people, or a ton of them, are still at Twitter.
Yeah.
The moderation still in effect, and a lot of it, it's almost like deep state in the Twitter. They set in bureaucracy who has been there through multiple leaders and often will still be there after they're gone.
Right. The point is that it's a deep state operation from day one. I mean, it may have been created as a deep state operation from day one, for all we know. Clearly, it was not designed to make money. That would be the last thing they wanted. The same with Facebook and these other social media platforms.
Well, mission accomplished. Twitter hasn't made money, I think, in forever.
Right. And will continue to lose money, even though Musk has. I recommend this episode of The Gray Zone with Matt Taibbi, Aaron Mate, and Max Blumenthal from now 4 days ago. If you want to get into the weeds on the last dump, fantastic. These three guys know everybody involved. These three guys know every single journalist involved, every single deep state actor involved, and it's a great ride. That's The Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate with Matt Taibbi from 4 days ago.
Yeah, that was good. I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet, but
it's good, right?
It's good, and it's the right mix of personalities, because occasionally each of them can be a little dry.
Yes.
But it's like they're enough with their friends, I think, that,
they feel very comfortable. Yeah, they let their hair down and they're riffing, but they know their stuff. It was kind of like me, you, and Barnes. So what about the meetup? Should we tell the people about the meetup? Or
well, hold on, you got to say what the Yiddish word is.
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. The Yiddish word of the day, because of penis with the MLK statue, is schlong. Is now schlong. I just want to put that out there, which in Yiddish means serpent. So you can juxtapose that for whatever you think it may mean in your own English language. But because of the statue, we're going to go with schlong today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, let's go to Eugene, and then we'll talk about the meetup after.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that. So there's this guy. Like I said, this is a story about ostensibly a whistleblower who may or may not have been perceived as a whistleblower, but there's plenty of documentation for this, which I said to Eric I will put up. Here's a picture of him. Yeah, that's probably 1967-ish, a little bit older there, but he goes back to a pretty famous high school, which is where I wanted to start, in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, Eric, called Hyde Park High School. And a lot of you Chicago people know this school. I don't really know it because I'm from New York. But Hyde Park High School, which is also known as Hyde Park Academy School in Chicago, has had many famous people. He went there. He wanted to be a musician, so he was in the band and the orchestra and everything else. And that school has produced people like Donny Hathaway, Minnie Riperton, Mel Torme, the Velvet Fog, for some of the older audience who may remember Mel Torme. Herbie Hancock, Eric, went to school there. The legendary
I've heard of the school. Okay.
You know the school? I mean, it's a pretty famous school.
Now that you say that, it's like, I think I've heard about that. Herbie
there
Hancock
it is. Yeah,
school.
it's kind of like the one in New York where they,
it's like Fame.
Like where Fame was based. It's the Chicago version of Fame. Paul Butterfield went there. The Paul Butterfield Blues Band, a great harp player who I discovered when I was a kid and started playing harp myself because of Paul Butterfield. He also had Steve Allen, the host of the Tonight Show, who was also a jazz pianist who went to school there. And oddly enough, another weird woman who went to school there is not a musician, Amelia Earhart. She literally flew through the courses. She was in and out.
Oh, God.
What? No, I'm just saying. Amelia Earhart. Maybe she was a musician. I don't really know.
Oh, God.
Maybe before she was a pilot,
Flew through it. Yeah.
Anyway, what happens with Dinkin is he goes to college. I think he goes to the University of Chicago, and he majors in psychology, and he begins to study psychological sets, which we're going to get into. He becomes a psychology guy, joins the Army, and becomes a private first class, Eric, whatever that is. What is a private first class in your
private first class is E3. There's 10 basic ranks for enlisted. So private first class, specialist, sergeant.
So it's the third level up.
Correct.
Okay, so he is put into the cryptology division. He's a cryptologist, but he also is working out of intelligence, and he is indirectly, because of his position, working for the NSA, because they oversee. Yeah, I didn't realize this. They oversee the cryptology people in the army. So he's in the army, but he's based in a place called Metz, M-E-T-Z, France, in 1963. Metz, France is it's called Metz Depot. It's a U.S. Army base that we, I guess, from World War II onward, we held this region of France, and he is, among other things, looking at the psychological sets, but he's also a code breaker. He's also a telegraphic code breaker, which is part of the gig. Now, in September of 1963, this is a complicated story, so kind of try and bear with me, because all of the facts of his story are not completely solidified, because something happens to him later on in the story that'll explain it. But in September of 1963, he begins to analyze psychological sets, which is his job. And the psychological sets are articles and ads in Life magazine, Look magazine, Newsweek, Overseas Weekly, Stars and Stripes. He begins to analyze articles, headlines, and photos. And you say, well, why is that important?
This is similar to what they do now with social media and analyzing. And I've talked to a CIA person who did that.
Okay. This is the beginning of it. And psychological sets was the military phrase that they used at the time for subliminal advertising and subliminal messaging, which will later, a few years after this story, become illegal in the United States. So what he's doing is he's looking at photos, articles, ads for the NSA to find subliminal messaging. Just take that for what it's worth at this time. He looks at numerous magazines and begins to form an opinion about events that are going to happen. For instance, he looks at a photograph of JFK in Ireland, and in the background is a headstone in a cemetery. In the background, he's looking at this with a microscope, right? And not a microscope, but like an eyepiece, a magnifying glass.
A loop, like a jeweler's
loop. Yes, a loop. Okay. So this is in, I want to say, Look magazine, 1962, 63, right? What's in the background? A headstone in the cemetery that says John F. Kennedy. Okay. He then looks at a motorcade in Germany, and JFK is standing up in the back of the motorcade. The photograph is from behind, and it looks like the back of his head is blown out. This is his report. This is his report in September of 1963. He then looks at some articles in the newspaper, in the magazines, and they have a black border dripping with blood red ink. Right? Okay, so that's weird. And then he begins to go deeper into this dive of all kinds of subtle things like this. Articles saying why Jack Kennedy won't survive re-election. The buzzword being survive. This is what his job is, Eric, is to pull out these psychological sets. Is JFK soft on communism? Does he deserve to be to his service to end? This is what he's supposed to do.
Is that like the shared messages too? Like when dark, or all of a sudden everybody's saying dark.
Yeah. This is in its primacy as a science. This is at the beginning of this subliminal studies, which they're calling psychological sets. He comes up with a package of notes and articles and photos and clippings, and he pieces it together. And he comes up with the following conclusion, which is what I'm going to tell you right now. This is in September of 1963. He concludes, based on all this material that he has, that JFK will be assassinated in Dallas, Texas in November of 1963. And he begins to boil down the date. His original date is November 28th, 1963, because it's Thanksgiving weekend, I believe. He then alters that date to November 22nd. He then finds the actual city of Dallas. This is in his own research. Now you say, well, that could have been after the fact, Mark. Not after the fact. I'm sorry. he writes a registered letter to an obscure man named Robert F. Kennedy. The registered letter he puts in on the outside of the envelope, he puts Dave DeWitt on there, who's one of his co-workers, because he fears that the military brass is involved in this plot. He believes that the plot, this is September 1963, he believes that high up military right-wing members of the military who believe that JFK is soft on communism and economic forces, right-wing economic forces, are involved in a plot to kill him and to blame it either on a communist or a Negro. Now, the Negro thing ends up in Mexico City, which is a subject of a later episode with a redheaded Negro, to quote Phillips, Atlee Phillips, that it was they came up with a separate plot that this a redheaded black guy gave Oswald money in Mexico City. That plot kind of diminished a couple of months later. But the fact is they did blame it on a communist, or at least someone that they said was a communist. So he puts this whole package together himself, September 1963, and he writes a letter to Robert Kennedy. And while he's waiting for the letter, I don't even know how to explain this, so I'm just going to tell you, he decides to go to Luxembourg and leaves the base, goes to Luxembourg, and tries to tell the U.S. Luxembourg is pretty close by. We're in France, so I mean, just for people who don't understand how long it is, it's a very quick trip to Luxembourg. So he decides to go to Luxembourg and tries to see Rifkin, the ambassador, and to tell the ambassador Rifkin of what he discovered. He brings his papers with him.
And he went AWOL. That's significant.
Well, not this time. He's not AWOL. They don't know he's missing yet, right? Okay. He will go AWOL when he comes back. But he now goes on this trip and tries to see Rifkin, the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Luxembourg, who was playing tennis. How do we know he's playing tennis? Because the Charge d'Affaires, Cunningham, tells him this over the phone. And Cunningham refused to see him also. This is, I want to say, he sends the letter October 16th to RFK. He leaves October 25th to go, and he's waiting for the letter. So he waits a little ways and nothing happens. So October 25th, he leaves to go see Rifkin in Luxembourg. While he's waiting for Cunningham refuses to see him. He's talking to a Marine guard and explains the whole thing to the Marine guard at the embassy. And the Marine guard says, "That's fascinating. I don't know what to tell you. I'm just the Marine guard," right? So he goes to the Israeli embassy right next door. And the Israeli ambassador says, "I think this is extremely important. Here's how you should handle it," right? And he takes it seriously. The only guy who takes it seriously is the Israeli ambassador to Luxembourg, who says you should go back to your base before you're considered AWOL and get out of here and go back and wait till you hear from Cunningham at the U.S. embassy in Luxembourg. So he takes the advice of the Israeli ambassador and goes back to the base at Metz, France. That's what he does. And while he's there, he's at the base and he realizes that he thinks they're coming to get him. He senses some of the other guys at the base said there's scuttlebutt, that they understand that you went outside channels, Eric, to Luxembourg. They know he went to Luxembourg, but he was allowed to. I think he went on the weekend or something.
Sure.
And yeah. So he says, okay, so he gets another pass. He gets a pass to go to Geneva, Switzerland, where he wants to go to the press office at the United Nations. So the CO, the commanding officer, gives him an actual pass on November 2nd. He says, "Here's your pass." He's back on the base waiting, and he senses he's going to be locked up, and he goes in, he gets a call November 2nd. I think he's packing a bag to leave to go to Geneva. And he gets called back into the CO, Eric, who says to him, your pass has been rescinded. And he says, what? He says, yes, we understand that people want to talk to you, and your pass has been rescinded to go to Geneva. So you know what he does? He takes out the pass and he rips it up like this, right in the face of the CO. And he says, okay, I guess, I can't go on. He rips it up, and the CO goes, I'm sorry, but, that's the orders I've gotten, regarding you. And he says, just go back to your barracks and you'll be notified. So he leaves the CO's office, and out of his pocket is the real pass. He had ripped up a blank piece of paper, Huntley.
Oh,
yeah.
Sleight of hand.
Yes. And he's got the pass. And what does he do? Jumps on a train for Geneva that night. And he gets the F out of Dodge. And they're coming for him, the MPs. And when they get to his bunk, he's not there. And he's already fled. Now he's AWOL. This is why I told you that, because now he's technically AWOL, and they're looking for him because he didn't forge the pass, but he forged and destroyed a blank piece of paper, which was alleged to have been the pass. So now he's on the run. Now he's got all this information, and he's got these people looking for him, and his bunkmates are not just his bunkmates. They're the guys who also work in intelligence and cryptology and decoding. So these guys know the whole story. They know everything that he knows because they were with him, and they will later be interrogated and forced to flip their own, understanding of him, of Dinkin. So Dinkin is now on the train. He gets.
This is totally a movie plot, by the way.
Oh, no, dude. This is unfreaking believable what's going on here. On the morning of November 3rd, on the run from the United States Army, with his briefcase full of documents and all his psychological sets and his subliminal analysis. Keep in mind, this is not some nutbag. This is a United States soldier in the cryptology department who uncovers this, not just through the psychological sets. You'll understand he was also decoding telegraphic messages, which I'm going to get into in a couple of minutes.
Not unlike Edward Snowden.
In his day, this is the flight of Snowden possibly being on the plane with the president of Bolivia, being forced down by Barack Obama. They're grabbing everything they can get their hands on, looking for Eugene B. Dinkin, the PFC third class or whatever you want to call it. So the letter to RFK is intercepted in Washington by a guy named James Angleton. I don't know if you realize who James Angleton of the CIA is.
Wasn't there a phone call related to James Angleton?
Okay, so Angleton receives this letter. It does not get to RFK. The letter is never received by the Attorney General's office. It's received by James Angleton, who gives it to a guy, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, named Jack Miller. And Jack Miller will be an interesting figure. We're going to get back to Jack Miller in a couple of minutes. But right now, Rifkin, on the run, enters the press office of an obscure agency called the United Nations. And in there, he finds journalist after journalist after journalist. He goes up to the editor of the Geneva Diplomat newspaper, tells him the story. He then finds somebody else who is named Alex Desfontaine from Time Life and Radio Canada, who's another journalist, tells him the story in Geneva. He then finds a woman named DeWorth from Newsweek and tells her the story of his psychological sets and his subliminal messaging and the plot to kill Kennedy. Now, the entire time, keep in mind, this is now November 5th. There's a ticking clock on Dinkin's mind because he knows, and whether anybody believes him or not, that November 22nd is the cutoff. Now, the military people in Metz have already contacted the CIA. That's why James Angleton has this letter written to RFK. And if the people want to go to locals after the show to unstructured.locals.com, I will be posting these top secret CIA documents that I have that were declassified in 1996. We'll put them up on Locals. If you want to join, you don't have to join, but Locals will have those documents. So there's also a letter from a guy in the FBI named J. Edgar Hoover that I have about Dinkin and this particular manhunt. So not only is everyone aware of this guy, everyone in the letters that I'm going to post on Locals indicate the story that I've just told you so far. Here's one of the letters from Hoover that I sent to Eric the other day. We'll post a cleaner version of this on Locals for the members. Anyway, he's part of the 599th Ordnance Group out of Metz. That's the organization at, I don't know what the Ordnance Group is, Eric, but it's also an intelligence. He has another group that he's part of. I think I want to say the 633 Intelligence Group that's based out of there too. So he's got a foot in both of them. But inside of the United Nations press room, he begins to tell each of them his story. And these people, especially DeFontaine, will attempt to file the story with Radio Canada on November 26th after the assassination happened. So on November 23rd, things have already occurred. But let's go back to November 4th, where he's now gone into November 5th and November 6th, and he decides to go to Bonn, Germany. He leaves Switzerland, he leaves Geneva, he's on the run. And like a guy, I want to say this is similar to Daniel Ellsberg with the Pentagon Papers, when he had them in the trunk of his car and he was driving from outlet to outlet, copying them as fast as he could on photocopying machines and dropping them off to various people in the media. This is apparently what, like Ellsberg, like Daniel Ellsberg with the Pentagon Papers, this is what Dinkin is doing. He's attempting to get his story out to as many reputable people as fast as humanly possible, with a ticking clock of November 22nd winding down. And he is looking for as many people as he can. He's not looking for anything to happen. He knows that by contacting these journalists, nothing's going to happen while he's with them, Eric. You know what I mean? But he's trying to spread out the story. So he jumps in the train, he goes to Bonn, Germany, and he goes to a newspaper called the Overseas Weekly. Now, the Overseas Weekly, as you recall from the General Walker episode, is the newspaper that Walker sues for harassing General Walker, right? So this is the same Overseas Weekly that we remember from a previous episode that I recommend everybody look at on General Walker that we did.
2 episodes. And
right.
This is the same General Walker who happened to be in charge of the best shooters in Germany at a minimum.
Right. And he's also the guy who wants to use the Davy Crockett small tactical nuclear weapons against the Russians, if indeed they make a move on Berlin, or maybe without the move on Berlin. We're not really sure, but he's removed from office by an obscure president named JFK and put into a mental institution by his brother, the attorney general, in a straitjacket. He's brought to Missouri to a mental prison, a psychological, psychiatric prison in Missouri. But that episode you should look at. If it ties in to this one a little bit, oddly enough, because of the connection with the Overseas Weekly. So he goes to the Overseas Weekly. The Overseas Weekly guy, those are all military guys, by the way. The Overseas Weekly is like Stars and Stripes, Eric. It's all, former military press guys, a lot of them from Stars and Stripes and shit. Mm. So this guy tells him, look, bro, you're AWOL. The best bet you can do is go back and surrender. You know what I mean? He really is. That's like the best bet. But it's already, like, I want to say November 4th has occurred. He's now into November 6th. So he now is on the run. So let's just go back to that letter in Washington, D.C., because the letter is now given to a Colonel Burris. And Colonel Burris knows the ambassador from Luxembourg because Rifkin used to be Lieutenant Colonel Rifkin, a friend of Colonel Burris from the old OSS days, Eric. So who is Colonel Burris? Colonel Burris is a military attaché for a man who we've done 3 episodes on. And Colonel Burris gets the letter. Colonel Burris gets the letter, and a guy named Cliff Carter gets the letter. And they take this letter and they go into this guy's office along with Angleton, who says, you better talk to your boss about this letter. And they go, what's the deal with the letter? He goes, well, read the letter. It's a guy in Luxembourg, and he's running around with his hair on fire, telling everyone about this assassination on November 22nd that's coming up. So they go in, Eric, and they read the letter to the boss. And the boss, Burris, and a guy named Dr. Hurst and Cliff Carter get on a plane immediately to fly to Luxembourg. They do not even wait. They leave the morning of November 3rd, Eric, to fly to the Benelux country of Luxembourg. Now, who is on that plane other than Lyndon Baines Johnson? He is the guy who panics from the letter. They get on air. Shut up. You will be quiet and you will listen, Hunley. I know your wheels are turning, but LBJ, if you have a photo of this man, LBJ with Dr. Hurst, his cardiologist who always travels with him, Cliff Carter and Colonel Burris get on Air Force Two, and it's 700 miles an hour, or as fast as Air Force Two will go.
Burris.
On the right?
I think so.
Yeah. Burris is a guy who's linked to OSS, CIA, and Angleton, and also to Rifkin, the ambassador in Luxembourg. They land the morning of November 4th, and LBJ makes a beeline to the embassy with Burris to see Ambassador Rifkin to find out what the hell's going on. Now, immediately upon LBJ's arrival on November 4th in Luxembourg, all of a sudden, back at the base, guess who's arrested?
Coincidence?
Dinkin is arrested and put into a psych ward at Ramstein Air Force Base at Landstuhl General Hospital. Landstuhl is the right next to Ramstein. It's the hospital on the base. He is taken into custody and put into the psychiatric ward, where he's kept on ice until after the assassination, right? So LBJ has a couple of cocktails, mission accomplished, flies back to D.C., where he makes a beeline for the ranch in Austin, Texas, where he waits from November 11th until the 22nd of November, when he becomes president of the United States. So you say to yourself, well, where has he been this whole October time, Eric? He's been at the ranch, and nobody can remember. Nobody can explain, including the LBJ people, why he was at the ranch for the entire month of October. And I suggest to our viewers that this is when people visited him and the plot was hatched in part of LBJ's part at the ranch, because he was there for the entire month of October. He comes back to D.C. and leaves for this event. He leaves for this event alone and returns back to the ranch. Now you say, how do you know that, Mark? Somehow, through the Freedom of Information Act, I was able to get the vice presidential logs, Eric, shown here.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you, my friend. And highlighted in yellow are the trips to Luxembourg. And we will put this up on our locals board. If you want to get involved in locals, you will see the vice presidential logs that I gathered over 10 years ago when I was doing research for Oliver, who then must have gotten a call from the LBJ people saying this is the worst script ever written. But in that script is this storyline about Eugene B. Dinkin. That's why it sounds like a movie to you, because in fact, it sounded like a movie to me too. And I thought it sounded like a movie to Oliver, but Oliver's worship of LBJ and protection of him because of his liberal brain chemistry prevented him from making this into a miniseries. However, that being said, Dinkin is now on ice in the psychiatric ward. On November 23rd, he's visited by the Secret Service. The Kennedy's dead. LBJ's president of the United States. Secret Service guy shows up, walks in, says to him, left or right? He goes, what? He said, the assassination, did you predict it was being done by the left or the right? And he goes, the right. And the guy goes, uh-huh. And he says, and who did you say would do it? And he says, well, either a communist or a Negro. And he goes, okay. And he leaves. Right? That was it. That's the Secret Service. A guy shows up from the Department of Defense. I don't even know who this guy is. And says, do you have the documents that you collected, the psychological sets, the subliminal ads and everything. Do you have those? He goes, yeah. He says, where are they? He says, they're in my bunk. They're in my barracks. That guy goes in, takes the documents and leaves to Washington without even giving him a receipt. Takes all his documents. Now, it turns out that Dinkin was not only analyzing psychological sets in magazines with subliminal advertising, he was also a code breaker. And one of the reason he was breaking codes, the codes he was breaking was not our codes, the codes of the French OAS. That was his job, breaking French OAS telegraphic codes. OAS is the CIA of France, for those people at home who don't know that. In 1962, when the French left Algeria, the OAS was broken up. That was the CIA of France. And in there are different codes that he broke. And it is my belief, and the belief of some others, possibly even Jim DiEugenio, that he broke the French code on the assassination, that the French had broken our CIA code. And we were now looking at the French code to see if they knew what we were up to in the CIA. This is why he was monitoring French telegraphic coding. I know. Dig that, man. So he learns about this, not just from telegraphic, not just from advertising and subliminal ads. That doesn't cut it. He was able to break, as a cryptologist, the telegraphic code of the OAS. And in that code of the OAS is a guy named Jean Sutray. And many of you aficionados will know that Jean Sutray was an assassin working for OAS who'd have been involved in the assassination attempt on Charles de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle was a target of OAS because of them giving Algeria over to the communists. According to OAS, they were nationalists, they were right-wing French military who had served in Algeria for many years. John Sutray was the character depicted in my movie pick of the week, The Day of the Jackal, which is also a great book by Frederick Forsyth. In that movie version, you will see a character depicted as the Jackal, who is Jean Sutray. Now,
which, by the way, side trivia note, Carlos Illich Sanchez used that book because it was left in a hotel as his identity when they were searching for him, Carlos the Jackal.
In fact, he takes the name the Jackal from Jean
that
Sutray.
book.
But that's where he gets his name from, is from that book. Yeah. So, which is also a great Olivier Assayas 3-part film series called Carlos, which I highly recommend, by the great French director Olivier Assayas. That is a separate pick of the week for Friday. But so Dinkin was monitoring the French OAS telegraphic codes, and I believe that he broke the code. And what the French had broken was the CIA code. They had broken our telegraphic communication. That's why Burris shows up. That's why Angleton takes the letter. That's why this guy that I mentioned is an interesting guy. The Jack Miller guy, Herbert Jack Miller, the Assistant Attorney General of the United States, is the guy who a month later, after LBJ is president, has Bobby Baker arrested and convicted. This was a guy who was being fed the RFK dirt on LBJ to Life magazine. Was Miller. Miller was the go-between, feeding them the dirt on LBJ and Bobby Baker. When LBJ becomes president, Miller assists in the arrest and conviction of Bobby Baker. He then leaves the Attorney General's office and goes into private practice. And what is that private practice? He becomes a big-time fixer in Washington, D.C. Herbert Jack Miller is involved in such political highbrow stuff, which includes representing a man named Richard Nixon in Watergate and advising him to accept the pardon of another Warren Commission member named Gerald Ford, thereby essentially admitting guilt on the part of Nixon by accepting, and Nixon did not want to accept the pardon. He was talked into it by Jack Miller because Nixon knew that by accepting the pardon, he was ostensibly saying he was guilty. And he did not want to do that. But he accepts the pardon anyway and gets the pardon from a guy named Gerald Ford, who then, not unlike today, has no vice president. So he nominates Nelson Rockefeller as his vice president. And Nelson Rockefeller is approved by the House majority and a House majority in the Senate and becomes vice president unelected of the United States of America, which may or may not happen in a couple of weeks based on last week's show. One of my predictions will be that this will happen again. Okay, so Jack Miller's not done. And he then represents another obscure figure named Teddy Kennedy in Chappaquiddick, which can be seen. This is Jack Miller?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack Miller then represents Ted Kennedy in the behind the scenes. This is not in court, obviously. This is what power brokers and fixers do, Eric. I recommend the movie Chappaquiddick as another weekend pick for this upcoming weekend. Chappaquiddick, a great movie made by a team of conservative directors. If you want to see how bad the Hunter Biden son movie is, watch how great the Chappaquiddick movie is. Watch how great it is compared to that piece of shit that was on Breitbart. And you'll see the difference that conservatives can make movies if they put their mind to it. So Chappaquiddick, a great movie. The deal to avoid prosecution is brokered by Jack Miller. Now, the reason Jack Miller is important, like I said, is he intercepts the letter to RFK with Angleton at the same time and prevents RFK from actually getting the letter about his brother's own upcoming assassination. Think about how heavy that is. That's really freaking heavy. And he then becomes, a fixer. But getting back to Jean Sutray, John Sutray is arrested, apprehended, or picked up in an obscure city named Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. He is then deported to Mexico. The French intelligence contacts the CIA and the FBI because they don't give a shit about the assassination of Kennedy. Everyone's already on the page that Oswald did it. They're worried about Jean Sutray being in Mexico City because that's where Charles de Gaulle is headed on a world trip. And this guy, Sutray, is linked to the first assassination attempt of de Gaulle in France. So French intelligence is asking the FBI in the United States to let them know where the hell John Sutray is. And the only reason we know about him being in Dallas that day is because they tell French intelligence that they apprehended him in Dallas and deported him to Mexico.
Jesus.
Yeah, the plot thickens, my friends.
And anybody who wants to know this fine fellow is John Angleton.
Oh, James Angleton, yeah.
Who
becomes a complete alcoholic, as you could see by his face here. He later goes crazy and is forced to resign or retire, late in his career. But he was a total alcoholic and became paranoid and delusional. And he felt the CIA was completely infiltrated by Soviets and begins to do all kinds of crazy crap. But the point of the matter is this was on his watch because it was international, Eric. The letter, it comes from France and it involves French OAS, which, okay. So a couple of months later in March, not even in March, I want to say December, Dinkin is transferred. He's transferred, I think, November 26th, maybe December 3rd, to Walter Reed Psychiatric Hospital in D.C., where he is threatened with electroshock therapy, given mind-altering drugs, and is told that he has a rare disease called schizo assassination prognostication illness.
What?
I swear to God, it's called schizo assassination prognostication disease, where they tell him that unless he agrees that he's completely insane that they're not going to let him out. So Dinkin begins to cooperate with them. He cheeks his own meds. He doesn't take them. He cheeks them and spits them out. They're now giving him electroshock treatment. His mother writes another letter to RFK, which is also intercepted. She says that my son is now in Walter Reed. She writes a letter, the mother, to RFK. But RFK is now a vegetable because of the death of his brother. So RFK doesn't respond, and this gets again buried by Miller and people in the CIA, this letter. These letters are then released years later in 1996, which are the ones I'm going to put up on Locals after the show. So he's now under the psychiatric control of the psychiatric team at Walter Reed. And he begins to think the only way I'm going to get out of here is to agree that I'm insane and agree with everything. And he writes this. He writes this in his own diary, that he agrees to their prognostication and diagnosis that he's mentally ill.
I love how on the nose their diagnosis is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, schizoid assassination prognostication, which is rare, but nevertheless, he does have it. Okay, so then he is released from the mental ward. He goes home and he moves to Encino, California, right out here in the valley in LA, where he later dies many years later, 2000. I think he lives to like 2012 or something, or really a long life. But he, in March of '64, they send all this information. Richard Helms and J. Edgar Hoover send this information to the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission refuses to call him as a witness and buries the information and does not even publish his name, despite the fact that they have all kinds of 10 million odd little things in the Warren Commission. This is not one of them. His name is not in the index. There's no interview of Dinkin, even though he's in D.C. and he's out of the Army and he's out of Walter Reed. They make it seem that he is a paranoid, delusional soldier who lost his mind, who got lucky in predicting certain events, like picking Seabiscuit to win the Kentucky Derby. Just luck doesn't make you a expert on horse racing, you know. So right, so they write to the Warren Commission saying that this guy is basically nuts, and that's May 19th, 1964. They get that letter from both the CIA and Hoover. So it's a double barrel action on the part of U.S. intelligence. He is not contacted until the 70s when he sues through the Freedom of Information Act. He tries to get his own documentation and contacts the House Assassination Committee that was investigating the conspiracy to kill Kennedy. And he reaches out to them with his story. And that's why that plus the Assassinations Record Review Board this is the letter. What's the date on that letter? 1977?
Yeah, August 10th, 77.
That's him writing to Robert Blakely. Now, Robert Blakely is a fraud. He's the guy that took over the House Assassinations Committee and said the mob did it. He was put in there, Blakely, for that reason. He buries this Dinkin information again. So this guy, Blakey does the same thing. He buries it like the Warren Commission does. But we have the documentation, at least now, and most of the stuff is released in 1996 in the Assassination Record Review Board stuff that comes out in that late period of time. So we now have a legitimate whistleblower who ties in the CIA and the FBI with knowledge before the assassination. That is the legend of Eugene Dinkin. The fact that he was able to alert, either by his whistleblowing or by his stumbling onto the plot, the fact that we now have in writing that the CIA and the FBI was aware in September and October of 1963, as they were in Mexico City with David Atlee Phillips trying to frame Oswald down there. We now know on a second source that they were aware of the plot from a guy who stumbled onto it or decoded French OAS telegrams or through psychological sets or through subliminal messaging. That's the legend of Eugene B. Dinkin, my friends. And this is a totally obscure guy in the folklore of the JFK assassination. But these are the type of people that we want to get on to the YouTube channel or onto Rumble. So they'll be out there historically for people to take a look at. I know about this. Jim DiEugenio knows about it. In fact, Jim Garrison knew about it. Jim Garrison stumbled onto this in his investigation during the Clay Shaw trial. He investigated Dinkin and because it was the same period, earlier time where he knew about Dinkin and somebody had contacted him about it. So the fact that this knowledge is out there does not mean that anybody knows about it, Eric.
Wow. It's it's so sad to consider, though, that, I mean, he really was Cassandra.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There was nothing more that Eugene B. Dinkin could have done. He went to every journalist. In fact, these journalists were then approached by the Secret Service, told to shut the F up, just like they did in Dallas with the Parkland doctors and the footage that they shot in Dallas from local news. They went to these the Newsweek journalists. Now, CD, what's his name? The head of Life magazine was the head of psychological warfare under Eisenhower. He ran Life magazine. So you had a lot of forces against Dinkin. By him going to the media, he did not know how much the media was controlled by, even back then, by the CIA and other elements of the deep state. So him running into the house is like
he ran into Mockingbird.
Right. It's like running into a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the guy's in there with the chainsaw in the garage. You know, I mean, they alerted their higher ups that he had gone AWOL. Look at what happens. LBJ gets in a plane and flies to Luxembourg, Eric. I mean, you know, somebody said to me a while back, why didn't he just have Burris do it? But that's not LBJ's style. LBJ, this was so important to LBJ that he got off his fat ass and he flew to Luxembourg. Think about that.
With a case of whiskey at his side.
Case of Dewar's and his king-size bed. He had to take that dismantled king-size bed with him and the cases of scotch anytime he flew to Europe. So they had to load up Air Force Two, which he said probably, I'm never going to fly in this piece of shit again after November 22nd. So he flies to Luxembourg. He later goes to Holland. He does an overnight in Holland, in the Netherlands, and Belgium. He hits on the princess from Belgium in another drunken faux pas on the way back to the United States at a state dinner the next night. So he tries to pick her up to no avail. She's not buying it. But Jumbo came with him, obviously, to Europe, you know.
As he would. Right.
So he now flies back and goes directly to the ranch to wait for JFK's arrival in the great state of Texas. You know, and Mrs. John Connolly's famous line, you can't say that Dallas doesn't love you, Mr. President, you know, to JFK as they're turning the corner onto the nightmare on Elm Street. The fact of the matter is LBJ was hands-on with stuff that was super important to LBJ. He was not going to designate to Cliff Carter or to Colonel Burris something at this level.
Yeah,
and he did not want to pick up the phone because the phones are tapped, Eric.
As he would know.
As he would know probably from people like Angleton, you know, who may or may not be in on it. But the point of the matter is, do you want to pick up the phone and say, pick up this maniac who's running around Luxembourg? You really want that on the record? Jeez. Especially because that's what the guy's doing. He's doing telegraphing and telephonic code breaking. Yeah, I think he panicked and he got it done. They got him picked up and they put him on ice for the assassination. He was in a mental institution for the time it took to have the assassination occur. Schizo assassination prognostication disease. One of the rare
word of the day.
Word of the day, my friend. And you could take that to the bank. I don't even know if Roger Stone knows that one, because whatever we researchers come up with becomes Roger Stone's talking points a couple of months later.
Oh, be nice.
No. Not that I begrudge Roger Stone, because look, the message is correct. I mean, what he laid out with Viva the other day is correct. It is correct. And if he, his only thing is he says his researchers came up with this or whatever, I mean, if I was Philip Nelson, I would pick up the phone and call Roger Stone for, money or accreditation at least, But I think I have the book. I think he might credit a bunch of different researchers in the book. I'm going to have to look.
He definitely credits Caro, I believe. I think we all have to credit Caro.
I'm going to have to look because there are acknowledgments in the book. So maybe he does credit Philip Nelson. But yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story. And
that's Cliff.
That's Cliff Carter. Yeah, Cliff Carter on the left. Yeah, that was his main hatchet man. That was the main guy for LBJ. Really quiet dude, a guy who could take care of business more than Jack Valenti. Jack Valenti was either a homosexual, and I don't mean that in a bad way, or a compromised guy. I think he was compromised because I think Hoover was on to Jack Valenti. And then he had another gay aide who was arrested at the YMCA a week before the election with Goldwater for blowing a man through a glory hole, and then was picked up by the FBI. I'm sorry. Did I say something? Well, that's what he was charged with. I don't.
Oh God, yes, and that's who he fired. All this is in our LBJ.
Oh yeah,
episodes, by the way. So
Walter Jenkins was the aide who was arrested by J. Edgar Hoover's men, and then there's the famous audio tape of LBJ asking Hoover how Hoover is able to identify gay men, and Hoover goes into a song and dance, literally acting with limp wrists and walking, because he says this to LBJ that they walk differently and they move differently, and LBJ says, "Can you show me?" There's Walter Jenkins. Yeah. Poor Walter Jenkins. He was married and had like 6 kids or something. He was fired by LBJ, who did not believe he was gay at all. But as LBJ was told by J. Edgar Hoover, because LBJ felt that a guy named Barry Goldwater had done this as a political dirty trick, Eric, and it was not a political dirty trick. In fact, J. Edgar Hoover tells LBJ they had arrested Jenkins a couple of years before at the same place doing the same thing. So LBJ says, "For God damn it, why don't you tell me this stuff, J. Edgar? Why I'm always the last person to hear about this crap?" And LBJ is not.
We have put that call up on Locals, I believe.
Yes. On Locals, we have that call. Yes. And he talks about limp-wristed, walking, sashaying. But he says to J. Edgar Hoover, "Let me see, J. Edgar, why don't you do that little walk you did there? Let me see how that looks." And he's making Hoover literally come halfway out of the closet by doing this. Really sadistic on the part of LBJ.
Shocking.
Yeah. There's a lot to this man, my friends, and I think that's why there's so little written. Not so little. I mean, if you could read Caro and you could read Philip Nelson and now Roger Stone's book, which I do recommend. I mean, the Roger Stone book is like the Reader's Digest condensed version of all the other stuff. If you don't know anything about the JFK folklore with LBJ, you can read The Man Who Killed Kennedy, I think is the name of the book. LBJ, The Man Who Killed Kennedy?
Something like that. It's very accessible.
It's accessible is what I mean. Yeah, it's very accessible. You don't have to be a brainiac. You don't have to read all the Caro books. The Nelson book is very thick. And the other books are very complicated. Bloody Treason by Noel Twyman, I think it is. But anyway, you could read the Stone book. And the Viva interview I highly recommend from the other night. It's really well done by Viva at the Viva Studios in Florida.
Locals.
The Locals has a studio now, right, Eric?
It's nice looking setup.
We may get to see that, right, Eric?
Well, there's a rumor going around that there may be how do I put it? A free-form Friday
What?
in person.
What?
Live.
What are you saying to me that the four of us may be live in the same space for a meetup?
It's looking that way.
Dear God, this may be bigger than I thought, Hunley.
Late in March
What?
in the greater Miami metro area,
Right?
as we have not settled on what and when yet.
Okay.
We're looking at if people want to kind of has out their calendars, looking at March, and if we did it on a Friday, probably the 24th.
Okay.
Or that weekend, the weekend of the 24th.
Right. Friday or Saturday.
That we're looking at joining the Viva and Barnes meetup, because I want to give credit.
It's their meetup. It's not our meetup, but our people can come, right?
Anybody can come. I'm not sure what the admission's going to be or anything else, but
right,
it will be a meetup, and there's a lot of, I think, audiences who are crossovers. I'm sure that many people in the chat. If you guys watch Viva and Barnes, go ahead and type 1 in the chat. It'll fill up pretty quickly.
That's funny. Well, you do see the same commenters on their show. You see Pasha and some of these other cats on both shows. So the meetup, it's accessible. It's Miami. I presume it's going to be accessible to a lot of people then. It's not like an obscure place. I mean,
right. Well, and I don't know Miami, Fort Lauderdale, but there's airport there. That probably
the weather should be decent in the end of March, right? I mean, it won't be boiling and it won't be cold like some other places. So it's a good location, and then hopefully we'll do a live show from there, or at least a live something or other.
There's going to be a meetup for sure of some kind, but we are going to try to turn that into.
This is breaking news, Hunley. This is breaking news. Although Barnes talked about it at the end of the show Sunday night.
Yep.
Barnes brought it up at the end, so we're not stepping on there.
What the hell is 1.2?
less than 1 or 2 or something.
I don't know, but there's a lot of ones that have flown by.
Right. Well, if you like this information that I put out today, you may want to help me get some more Kennedy books on PayPal, or you may want to subscribe, or you may want to buy this ratty dog that Hunley's going to put up right about now.
In a minute, but I want to talk about some super chats.
I'm sorry.
I mean, we got some members here.
Oh, it's a new YouTube member. Okay, good. I ordered the bear, by the way. I ordered another bear and some other stuff the other day.
Have you ordered Oswald yet?
No, I ordered a replacement of the bear because these girls keep stealing my bears.
So you're going.
I need a bear replacement program.
Substandard bear. That's fine.
I need a bear Substack program.
Jay McCall became a member.
Okay.
And thank you, Craig, for the £5. And Pinochet's helicopter tours, probably my favorite name.
That's a great.
What's up there? It's all your fault. You folks inspire me to dive further down the rabbit hole of JFK and take on a project myself. My library has gotten larger also.
Okay, way to go. You don't have to listen to me. I'm not going to be around forever, folks. I mean, you're going to have to pass this on to your children. I'm not doing this for me already.
All right. Pasha, still here.
15-minute drive from Metz. Right, yeah, it's less than an hour. Thank you. Yeah, I looked at it myself the other night. Takes longer to get from Texas. I miss asking about...
Get us word of the day.
Well, we already did it. Yeah, we couldn't wait for you anymore because of the Martin Luther King statue. We went with a different word today.
What?
I seriously think.
Oh, we have many episodes on, Mark. Just trust me.
On me?
Box of Broken Dreams.
Oh yeah, no, there's plenty of
Sonora
stuff.
House.
Right.
Many episodes.
Yeah, no, I'm in a lot of these episodes.
Yeah, Mark is not only
what you really need was an episode about my mother. Now she was fascinating.
For sure. Pinochet's helicopter tours again.
Whoa.
Do you think we'll ever have the fortitude to exhume JFK? No.
I don't know about exhuming him. I mean,
probably not.
Doug Horn of ARB makes a great case for it. The autopsy is one key to the cover-up. I don't know what's going to be left in that autopsy thing there. The body.
Yeah, and who knows what that is even in the ground.
Right. I mean, the brain is not there. So what are you going to be looking at?
But you can go by the skeleton. You can say, okay, well, no, there is definitely a broken, or something in the skeleton, the bullet hit, or I don't know.
Yeah,
it's still
the one you should is RFK, because that would actually show some angles and different things of bullet trajectory.
Who we will be covering after JFK.
Who, RFK?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
that's coming.
Yeah, dude, I have to go to the gym. Get ready for that one.
I mean, we've already done 3 episodes on Sirhan and RFK.
Right. Well, I mean, the fact that he never gets this letter is really creepy.
Yep, that's true. Pinochet, from what we know now, especially Max Goodstock, at what point did the deep state switch from the rights control to a globalist left we now have now? I think this is the problem. It's always been globalist.
Yeah,
it's just a question
this thing is in Metz, France, that I've just told you. This whole episode is based in France and in Luxembourg and Bonn. This whole episode is overseas.
Yep. Alex Glance, and it's a super sticker. Thank you. Heather Whatever. Thank you. Secret McSquirrel, £2, and asking for the like, and she's a mod. Secret Squirrels all over.
Okay, so you could subscribe to this based on her prognostications.
Yes.
The Newsweek reporter was named Dewhurst, by the way. If anybody, I don't know the exact spelling, but Dewhirst, if I recall, on that Newsweek reporter. But we'll put up some interesting things on locals. What's this? Pinochet's back?
Pinochet's back.
What does that say?
Do you know where I may find info as to what LeMay was doing in Toronto at the secret XMI6 base? Also, have you looked into Hawkeye Works, where Zapruder film was edited? Mary Poppins came out in '64. Okay, a lot in there.
I don't know anything about any of that.
We will be doing General LeMay, though, probably 2 or 3 episodes.
Touch on the so that'll be an episode.
At least 1, maybe 2.
He ends up at the autopsy of all places. So,
yep, that might be a 2-parter too, like Walker.
Maybe.
I'm just setting expectations. Peter Coscido, super sticker. Thank you so much. Peter's very, very generous. Seen Peter a lot. And Mark, great that you mentioned the Monks last week. I was friends with Dave, their banjo player.
Right on. Okay, what about it? That's all he says. Okay. Yeah, the Monks were the inspiration for Devo. I just want to put that out there. And the Monks, I think, were based in Germany, and they were in the army at the time they formed the Monks. They may have been involved in this. It was like the 60s.
And we had a $5 Rumble rant earlier, and I forgot who it was. I think it was I don't recall who it was. I appreciate it, but when I refresh the page, the rant is gone. I can't find it at this point. So whomever it was that gave the Rumble rant, thank you very, very much. It is a regular, and I just forgot the name. I think it starts with an S. But.
So this is on Rumble, you're saying this entire show was on?
This is on Rumble. 371 people are watching us on Rumble. Over 2,000 are watching us here on YouTube.
Oh, my.
And we deeply appreciate all of you. I mean, amazing. I mean, look at how much attention Eugene B. Dinkin is getting.
Nobody's ever heard of this guy.
They have now.
They are now. This is the new Jim Braden, Mac Wallace department. Maybe we could link the 3 of them together on one page, Eric.
Well, they're all going to be in that playlist.
Dinkin, Wallace, and Braden.
Sure. The J and more to come.
Yeah, there are some guys of this level that nobody's really talked about. I've got a bunch of files on other guys. If people want to subscribe, if you don't subscribe, I'm not going to do it. But if you do subscribe, if you do join locals, I'll do it. But if not, I'm just going to take it to the grave. Screw you all.
On that note, if you want to help support Sabbath and digging up information on them, his book fund can be found at his PayPal.
Oh, thank you.
Venmo.
Or Venmo.
Both of these are in the description.
Right.
If you want to just give money and support, and it probably won't be used to buy a JFK book by me, you can always support me there too.
Hunley Incorporated.
That's right.
Yeah, or you can meet up with Hunley in Florida and pass him cash on your own.
Yes, you can.
The best show on YouTube. Just need more episodes. I'd love to hear some Laurel Canyon. I wish there were some, but there's none that I know of. So unless you want me to make them up, I don't really know any.
Yeah, there's things that are thrown about, but
yeah.
There are a lot of episodes.
The
There's
CIA,
a lot of meat.
The CIA did not create Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I'll just put it that way. They actually wrote those songs without the CIA.
Allegedly. Well, on that note, folks.
Hey, what happened to the dog?
What happened to the dog? You're right. Oswald.
Thank you. Bravo.
A couple Oswalds went out over the past week.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Pull his shirt down. His shirt is going up over his head.
Well,
pull his shirt. Yeah, there you go.
He was busy wrestling with the.
That's better.
He was wrestling with the Goofy Bear.
The Goofy Bear fighting it out in the middle of the night at Hunley's house. Well, we'll be back on Friday for something, right? Or no?
Yeah. Friday is Freeform Friday, which means we don't know.
We don't know what's going to happen, but it's without Barnes. So don't come up next Friday and say, where's Barnes? He's once a month, people. That's all we can get him. He's trying to save the planet. We don't have time to have Barnes on for your entertainment every Friday.
Well, his schedule, though, it's funny because he'll release like where he's going to be in the weekend. He's got like 8 episodes or 8 shows, and then he does shows like every night.
The U.S. Supreme Court. Then he's in a federal court in Chattanooga. he's doing the vaccine case with what's her name against Pfizer that he was talking about the other night. The whistleblower case.
Somebody's asking, is it Robert Blakely or Blakey?
I think it's Blakey, but I'm not sure. I'd have to see that signature.
Okay.
He was a fraud anyway. I mean, that guy was a plant. They fired the original guy really quickly. The original guy was tough. The original guy was a tough ex-New York prosecutor. They got rid of him pretty damn quick. And that guy was gone within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's Blakey.
Blakey, yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
All right. So I guess, you know what? Check us out on Locals. You can follow us for free. And if you like it and you want to get into some of the documents that we have for paid supporters, please do so.
Yeah, I mean, get behind that paywall if you can for $5 a month. There's a lot of interesting stuff back there. That's all I can tell you. I don't know if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, it's free, on the outside anyway. So I'm not telling you if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. But you can become a member of our secret society. It's the Hunley and Grobert Illuminati. If you want to pay for that, you get the secret handshake, the Dakota ring, and all kinds of maps to places you probably never even heard of before.
Exactly.
Right.
So until then, hope to see you around in Locals. If not, we'll see you Friday.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for everything.